So we'll pick up where we left off. I spray painted the collar with a base coat of white, and now I am going to hand paint it with acrylic paint. Starting with just the base colors. I mixed my own turquoise because I didn't have any turquoise paint. So I started up at the top making these. They're almost like, they'll wind up sort of looking gemstone-ish in a turquoise. Art Nouveau always has wonderful detail and patterns, and I always try to include something like that on each costume I do. So this is sort of that piece that's going to have a lot of that detail on it. As we go through, you'll see that I do the scales. I do kind of a base of a gray, and then I do it with a darker gray, and then I go back and I highlight again with the white. But it's basically a lot of just layers and details, starting with the light, going down to the dark, and then highlighting again with the light. Right there, I'm putting a turquoise edge on it to make it look a little more finished, and a little more polished. In a second, you'll actually get to see the finished product. So that's what it looked like when it was all done. It took quite a while. Here's sort of a close-up of the shadow and the detail that we did. The next step is going to be adding these grommets to the shoulder pads. I had grommets laying around, so I put them in the corners, like you'll see in just a second. There's the grommets, and because those shoulder pads don't lay flat, I added this chain so it kind of weights it on the back and then held together so it doesn't get tangled. Next is the horn. So I had a wire base with foil, and now I am paper macheing over the horns so that I can paint them. I use flour and water because that's what I have in my house, handy and readily available. For these horns, I did 2 layers of paper mache. One going kind of one direction around, and then another long ways, because if you cross-hatch paper mache, it's stronger. And making sure that it dried thoroughly between layers. I even put them kind of out in the sun so that they could dry faster that way. Making sure to get around the base too, so that there isn't any foil sticking out. You'll notice I'm using ripped up sheet music because that's what I have lying around is photocopies of music. I think this was Sweeney Todd. So, I mean, horns, Demon Barber of Fleet Street, it feels appropriate. Cool, so the next step is to paint these horns. So I did a base coat of just plain white. Then, after I got the white on, before it was just barely dry, I took brown paint and dry brushed that on, and it kind of mixed with the white to make this kind of gray color. Which the horns, if you look in source photos of Haku, are kind of a white, creamy color-ish. So I, again, did that base color, coat of white, and then I took brown and dry brushed over it. And then I got it pretty muddy and messy. And that was a little too dark for my taste. So after I dry brushed all the brown on and got it pretty messy, I then let them completely dry and did another stippling of white over the top. And I made them darker at the base so they look a little more natural. So hopefully from a distance they don't just look like white horns. They look like they've got some dimension and depth to them. Making sure that the paint job looks even between the two. So this is the assembly process. So I made sure I paid attention to which side was which. Sort of tested them out first before I then hot glued the bottom, and then used those kind of wired tails to wrap around the headband. Now this got pretty heavy once the horns were actually in place with hot glue and with all this paper mache. So it'll be interesting to see how they fit with the wig, and if I have to restyle the wig, which we'll get to here in just a second, to make sure that it all works together. But the horns go the same direction and they're about the same height, so I'm pretty happy with how they came out. So that's what that looks like in its final form. And now the wig. It had really long bangs, and to cut bangs you should always do it on yourself. So I cut them and styled them kind of back away from my face, using hairspray to hold it in place. I'll eventually, when I'm happy with the way it looks, I'll use spray adhesive. So I had these long pieces in the front that I wanted to curl. So I use foam curlers, and then I use a boiling water technique, and I'll show that here in a little bit. So there's all this really long hair. In my source photos for Muka, the ones I'm using show these kind of pretty braids that are kind of flowy and bulgy. So I decided to do a side braid of sorts and try to fluff it on my head. And then for the actual hair itself, I'm going to do this kind of jasmine style braid with a bunch of different hair ties. So this is me just trying to fluff it and get it the way I want it to look. When you're brushing out a wig, you got to start from the bottom up. So take a hair tie, wrap it around in one place, create a little hole, flip the ponytail through, and then I fluffed it and sprayed it to get these kind of pretty arcs, I guess, make it look full and pretty. And I cut away any little pieces that are not cooperating because it isn't real hair, so cutting it doesn't matter. So if they don't want to cooperate, they get snipped. Especially his tail. The tail one didn't cooperate, so I actually flipped it around twice so I got kind of more volume out of it. And then the end piece was just kind of straight, and in a lot of Muka, the hair is curly. There's a lot of waves. So we're curling the bottom of that as well. So the next step of this is going to be setting the curls, and I like to use boiling water. Well, normally I dunk the whole wig in boiling water, but this won't work for this one. So I went to my kitchen and I ladled boiling water into a bowl, and I'm dunking the curls into boiling water in this little bowl. Clearly it was hot. I had to use a little mitt. Having a towel underneath so that it could drip. And basically you just wait for them to cool and dry. That's what it kind of looks like all together. And the next step is to put it all together. So you'll see that soon.